Good morning. Thank you. So first of all, let me thank Professor Manoush again, Hero, for the kind invitation. I had a great time listening to the brilliant speakers in the past couple of days. So thank you for sticking with me right before lunch. And Shira, can you put in the presentation mode? Thank you, so that I can scroll through the slides. Thank you. So as we've heard for the past couple of days, and even the first day at the kickoff event at Dimension Data, the rapid proliferation of information and communication technologies in the past 30 years and internet uptake have really brought immense benefit to organizations and countries around the world in terms of increased efficiency, productivity, global economic growth, modernization, innovation. The world we're living in has become so interconnected thanks to, again, the thing we've heard about, digitization, the internet, cloud computing, mobile devices, soon to be 5G wireless transmissions, that we have become interdependent at an unprecedented level. The connectivity has allowed really communication that was unthinkable just a decade ago. At the same time, the world we live in, because of that, the economic growth is increasingly dependent on connecting our countries, our companies, our communities to these flows of information, knowledge, and exchange. This is also why our national leaders, as we heard from the Minister of Communications, are increasingly investing in the digital agenda and the digital economy of our nations. In fact, increased internet connectivity can lead to incredible opportunity for inclusive and sustainable economic growth and development, but only if the underlying ICT infrastructure and the devices connected to it are secure and resilient. As we have seen in the past decade, many countries have started to launch broad strategic frameworks, we call them their digital strategy, digital agenda, to really increase the internet uptake, encourage connectivity, stimulate economic growth, improve the ability to grow our digital skills, attract foreign direct investment. At the same time, the downside of our digital connectivity is that our extreme reliance on the internet for all aspects of our lives has left the individuals, organizations, and our companies more exposed and vulnerable to cyber threats, cyber risk. This is also why some of our countries are starting to pass cybersecurity strategies. And part of our project, that I'm happy to talk to you today, is to show you the importance of having actual objective and repeatable metrics to measure, to evaluate a country's commitment and maturity to closing the gap between their current cybersecurity posture and the national cyber capabilities needed to protect their digital investment and support their digital future. So there are several international frameworks that can be used to better understand and manage cyber risk. I've had the honor and pleasure to work with Melissa Hathaway for the past 5 years on the Cyber Readiness Index 2.0. This is one of the most well-known and well-respected methodologies we have around the world, and gives all of us, anybody can download it, real, comprehensive, comparative, experience-based methodology to really assess and measure where our countries stand both on the digital agenda and the national cybersecurity strategy. In fact, one of the key objectives is to demonstrate how national security is closely intertwined with information communication technology uptake and internet connectivity. And when those are aligned, then a country really has a chance to achieve the economic growth and the security goals that it's seeking. The Cyber Readiness Index 2.0 is based on the first version that was published by Ms. Hathaway in 2013 and includes 7 essential components. And almost 100 data indicators within each of those essential components. We have published 14 country studies and are working on several more. And this is the only methodology that has been translated in all 6 UN languages. And most of the country profiles, which are available in my last slides, have the link, and all the contact information are available in most of the UN languages. So as I mentioned earlier, the Cyber Readiness Index is really based on 2 sets of metrics. On one hand, we have the goal of economic prosperity, so then the Cyber Readiness Index can help national leaders better develop their digital strategy so that they can achieve that increased productivity, efficiency, innovation, modernization, and GDP growth that we're all seeking. At the same time, it can help national leaders better align those economic priorities to their national security goals. Because our countries are becoming increasingly concerned about infrastructure resilience, intellectual property protection, data protection, data privacy, as we heard from our speakers, the defense of their homeland and their sovereignty, and in most cases, their political stability. Talking about each of the essential elements, I figured we'll bring also some of the examples of how other frameworks and other countries are starting to align those 2 agendas and talking about these issues. So the first essential elements of the Cyber Readiness Index is the ability of a country to develop and implement a national cybersecurity strategies. And between 2017 and 2018, we also had the pleasure to inform and work with an international group of international organizations and other entities sponsored by the International Telecommunication Union in Geneva. The goal was to develop a guide to help countries develop and implement their national cybersecurity strategy and action plan. These international efforts resulted in this guide, which is also publicly available, and actually includes many of the aspects that the Cyber Readiness Index talks about. So first and foremost, when a country is undertaking the process of developing its national cybersecurity strategy, the first thing is to actually set its vision, its high-level objectives and priorities. And as we heard from the speaker yesterday, it's really important that those objectives and those priorities take into consideration the actual context of the country, their social, economic status. One size does not fit all. It is important that the country is able to conduct an assessment so that it is aware of what its key internet infrastructure vulnerabilities and dependencies are. So this means assessing and identifying the critical digital dependencies, whether they're companies, services, infrastructures, assets, that if they were harmed by a cyber incident or natural disaster, they would cause grave consequences to the country in terms of economic and national security terms. Another key aspect of your national cybersecurity strategy is to identify an actual competent authority, whether a person or an entity, that will be accountable for the implementation and update of the strategy. It's also important to lay out the steps, the programs, the initiative that the country intends to carry out to implement the goals and the vision set in the strategy, and to have clear timeline and to fund those initiatives. And when I talk about funding, obviously talking about money, but also people and material resources. The strategy usually also talks about an action plan, which might be integrated in the strategy or might follow up with actionable items and timelines and objectives. Ultimately, it's also important to have metrics and indicators to measure success. Today, according to the ITU and a lot of our research, 122 countries have either developed or are in the process of developing and publishing their national cybersecurity strategies. Obviously, these documents vary in terms of their length, how many initiatives they undertake, how broad they are, how many stakeholders are brought in that process of development. But most countries have developed some sort of national cybersecurity strategies, most of the developed countries. Unfortunately, though, very few of those countries have started to align their digital strategy on one hand, again, to pursue those goals of economic growth, economic prosperity, inclusive, sustainable growth, and on the other hand, their national security, national cybersecurity visions and goals. One thing that they have all mostly agreed on, which is the second element of the Cyber Readiness Index, is in developing an effective incident response capacity. This capacity in most cases take the shape of a national computer incident response teams, and at least 108 countries today have at least one national CERT or CCERT, and that it's usually the focal point for incident response coordination. A lot of the CERTs also provide proactive and reactive services, information and alerts. Within this element, we also look at whether the country has developed a national incident response plan, whether the plan is regularly exercised and updated, whether the country, in this case a national CERT, has also developed a way to inform businesses and government about rising threats through different alerts and warnings. Strictly connected to these elements is the ability to share information. So I figured I'll bring some practical examples, the different forms that the national CERT or a similar type of information sharing partnerships can take. So in Canada, for example, there is the Canadian Cyber Threat Exchange, which is a non-for-profit private entity that operates as a cybersecurity information sharing hub. They have a section that brings people together, cybersecurity experts, to share solutions and best practices. They also collect, aggregate, and anonymize information before they share it with different partners, and has helped incredibly in building trust among the different stakeholders. In the UK, we've seen the government really stepping in, and through the National Cybersecurity Centres, beside their incident response capability, they've also been very successful in bringing together private sector organizations, government, defense, security agencies to share timely and actionable information in real time in a secure environment. And this has also, you have a question, Professor? I thought you were raising your hand. So having a national cybersecurity strategy, incident response, and information sharing capabilities, though, is not enough, it's not sufficient to be cyber ready. We also look at the country's commitment to protecting its society against cybercrime and developing capability within its law enforcement. So two of the examples that I thought would be interesting. One is from India, because when we think about also training the law enforcement, and we're talking about police, judges, investigators, it's really important, first of all, that they understand what we're talking about. So one of the things that we found really interesting was that at the National Cyber Law at India University, that a group of experts works to translate these highly technical terms into legal or vice versa, the laws that India has updated or passed recently to translate them in technical cybersecurity terms. And they also offer a series of workshops, hands-on training for judicial officer, prosecutor, and investigative agencies. In Japan, where I'm headed to tomorrow, so I look forward to my trip but not having my device hacked, they actually passed an Internet of Things amendment to their law that allows workers at the Institute of Information and Communication Technology to hack in about 200 million devices to look for vulnerabilities. So those workers are allowed to use default password, common password, to attempt to hack in those devices, to develop a list of vulnerable devices, and then they will communicate it to authorities and internet service providers, who are then supposedly responsible for alerting individuals that their device is vulnerable, and again making a list of those devices. So it's an interesting approach. Another really important aspect of a country's cyber readiness is its ability to support the cybersecurity innovation, cybersecurity basic and applied research. But as we heard from many of our speakers, while we want to support increased connectivity and new solution and new application, we also need to be able to anticipate the cyber risk and the cyber threats that technology might bring into our environment. So some, again, really interesting examples from around the world are, for example, Israel. They wanted to be #1 exporter of cybersecurity solution. And they were extremely successful in creating the cybersecurity hub in the middle of the desert, although it's beautiful, in Beersheba. And they brought together, so the co-location of the different entities was really the key, from industry, academia, military, and the government together, to work together on cybersecurity solution. They also have some of the most successful trade missions around the world. And they're giving several tax incentives and other incentives for a company to establish an office in this cyber park. Chile is another interesting example because they really want to take advantage of their innovations and a lot of their startups to become a hub that can attract even more talent and can help promote Chilean companies around the world. So this incubator they created provides a lot of help for early stage, high potential companies to develop their product and bring it to market. Within the same element, the same index of investment in research and development, we also look at what a country is doing to promote cybersecurity education at all levels. In most cases, we find that while governments support their public university and public schools, it is actually the efforts of non-profit organizations or the private sector, or a combination of those, that created some of the most innovative programs. In Serbia, the Petnica Science Center, it's an extracurricular activities for really talented high school students, where they can continue and accelerate some of the studies of STEM subjects and learn more about information and communication technologies. This center also includes a Hacker Academy. In France, the Hack Academy is actually an online portal that offers tutorial, courses, quizzes, challenges, so it's a fun way for all kids to get online and learn how to be safer online, understand the importance of changing their password, being safer when they make purchases online, how to avoid phishing scams. So I invite you all to check out these initiatives. They're all really interesting and available to all. So in conclusion, because I want to welcome your questions and I brought lots of material and I hope to engage with some of you, we're very excited. We are actually conducting an assessment in collaboration with many of the entities present today of South Africa Cyber Readiness. And I've learned a great deal from the talks in the past 2 days. So for those of you who haven't had an opportunity to come and talk to us about your beautiful countries, please do in the next 5-6 hours. But being cyber ready is a continuous process. It never ends. And while we have to start with the assessment, again, of those key critical internet dependencies, understand what a country is able to do and willing to do, committed to do, to protect its digital investment, support its digital future, it has to be a continuous process, a continuous assessment to see what's working, what needs to be fixing, what needs additional funding and resources, stakeholders buy-in, the top leadership support, and it never ends as we continue to connect more our people, places, and things. And again, as I said, I wanted to leave you with all the contact information for our project. Please reach out. As I said, the Cyber Readiness Index methodology has been translated in all 6 UN languages. All the country profiles are available on the website. It's been translated in several languages. We are present on social media and happy to take all your questions later during the panel discussion. Thank you.